About some new research that came out showing that vitamin D did not help multiple sclerosis. It did not stop multiple sclerosis from getting worse, especially in patients that were diagnosed with the initial first attack, and hopefully the vitamin D was supposed to help slow down or decrease the percentage of people that would go on to develop multiple sclerosis, but that's not what the study showed. And so we're going to talk about this because it's very important. A lot of different practitioners, they're giving us vitamin D supplements thinking that's going to help us when we're diagnosed with MS or potentially could have MS. And so the research, this is different research. This is a double-blind placebo-controlled study, and we don't have a lot of those studies, so it's really important that we discuss this topic. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago, and by the grace of God and a lot of work on my part, I learned early on that multiple sclerosis was an infectious disease caused by parasites, caused by a parasitic infestation. And so now, 35 years later, we still really don't know what causes MS, and there is no cure. And we're stuck. Our standard of care for treating MS and other chronic diseases is gridlocked, I would say. And it's awful because people are suffering terribly. They're missing out on so much in their life. They're dying prematurely. And this could all be prevented if we would just open up the gates to let the research flow. So one of the potential, this goes back to the 1970s, they felt that if we were deficient in vitamin D, that could be a risk factor for developing multiple sclerosis. And since that time, there have been a lot of different studies that have been published. The problem is, I'll tell you about some of what they found, and it sounds great, but they're very small studies. They're not done well. They're observational studies, so there's no controls. But still, let's look at both sides and let's make a decision. So with the 1970s, again, it was believed that vitamin D therapy would really help patients that have multiple sclerosis, or I should say, even prevent MS, or if they have MS, it would help to slow down the progression of the disease. And there's certain key questions that we're all trying to get to the bottom of. Number one, does vitamin D prevent multiple sclerosis? The second question is, how does vitamin D impact MS activity? So how active the disease is. And the third question is, can vitamin D supplementation decrease multiple sclerosis activity in MS patients? So let's look at a few different observational studies, meaning that they didn't control anything, they were just watching. And it's kind of like an after the fact study. So looking at in pregnancy studies, what one study concluded was that MS risk was 90% higher in the offspring or the children of vitamin D deficient mothers compared with offspring of mothers that did not have a vitamin D deficiency. So that's important to note, that women that were deficient in vitamin D, they had a much higher incidence of offspring that had MS, 90% higher. This data suggests that insufficient vitamin D levels during pregnancy may increase the risk of MS. We're going to also talk about other things that could be giving us misleading information. And make sure to let me know, did your neurologist, did your doctor recommend that you really need to take vitamin D if you have MS or maybe a different autoimmune disease? And then another study, children born with vitamin D levels less than 30 millimoles per liter seem to be at an especially high risk of developing MS. The additional benefits of higher levels, that's like 25 units, was less pronounced. So under 30 less than 30 was definitely seem to be a higher risk for multiple sclerosis. And then let's look at vitamin studies that looked at vitamin D and the amount of MS activity, so how active the disease is. So for each doubling of serum, so like looking at the amount of vitamin D we have in our blood, for each doubling of serum vitamin D concentration from baseline 10, 20, 30, the MS relapse risk decreased by 27%. So this was a different study. So there's a possibility that conditions associated with MS relapse had an effect on serum vitamin D levels. So again, 27% decrease in MS relapse rate with doubling the blood test result of vitamin D levels. And then another study, the authors concluded that raising vitamin D levels by 50 nanomole per liter could decrease the hazard of a relapse by 50%. So these are all different studies that I'm grabbing. And I am creating a blog post on our website, livediseasefree.com. Every week we have an amazing blog post. You'll get all my notes there. Make sure to go to our website, livediseasefree.com. Make sure to opt in so that you get notified when I have new videos and also release new blog posts. Share this information with your doctor, talk to them about it, talk to other integrated practitioners, talk with other groups. And then also another study, the authors concluded that individuals with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis with higher vitamin D levels are at a much lower risk of the subsequent development of new lesions and of gadolinium-enhancing lesions on brain MRI, even after accounting for potential confounding factors. Another study, despite the limitations of this small study, so these are all different studies, despite the limitations of this small sample size or small study, these findings suggest that higher vitamin D levels in the relapsing remitting may slow neurodegeneration. The next study, lower vitamin D levels also correlated with lower odds of remaining relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. Greater disability and disease severity in MS. So lower vitamin D levels. So when your vitamin D levels are lower, then you will have lower odds of it not becoming progressive multiple sclerosis. Like it will more likely become progressive multiple sclerosis, also more disability and severity in MS, and poor nonverbal long-term memory performance. So there's a lot of different studies over the years from the 1970s to now where they have, like they're seeing that people that have multiple sclerosis and they, let's say, have a suboptimal vitamin D level, that they don't do as well, right? So, but I guess the big concern here is that, is it the low vitamin D that's causing the MS to be worse? Or is it whatever's causing multiple sclerosis is causing us to have low vitamin D? That's the question. And that's why all of these different studies that are not controlled, they're not giving some as placebo, and they're not making sure that the people that are doing the study are blind, that they don't know who's getting the vitamin D, who's getting the placebo. They're doing it over a long period of time. They're controlling for a lot of factors that may not be an exact science. Like one study never gives you the full truth. But the problem with all of these studies is that it's like you don't know like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the vitamin D, low vitamin D that was caused by something else that is just associated with MS? Because it's true that it's associated with a lot of other diseases too, low vitamin D. So it's not just an MS thing. And we'll kind of summarize at the end, like the takeaway. So let's see where I ended up here. So this this data, or all of these different studies, they are largely generated, again, by observational studies that restrict the extent to which inverse associations, which we talked about. Is it like something else is causing the low vitamin D, and that's just present in people that have MS? And that's the problem with these studies. So some of these experts were saying that, to their knowledge, that there had not been any large randomized placebo-controlled studies that would really kind of get us closer to an understanding if this is really helpful. It's important to talk about this because we're stuck in this paradigm of suppress the immune system. The immune system has gone haywire. Take vitamin D3 to help, support your immune system, and you're good to go. Just take the disease-modifying drugs and you're good. And we're not happy with that. That's not giving us our life back. So this new study is called Vitamin D Did Not Reduce Multiple Sclerosis Disease Activity After a Clinically Isolated Syndrome. So the clinically isolated syndrome is when a person gets their first MS attack. They don't know for sure if they're going to develop MS or not. A lot of people do, a few people don't. So they call it, instead of giving a person an MS diagnosis, they'll say, well, we'll call it a clinically isolated syndrome. We'll watch you, we'll monitor you, and we'll see if this develops into multiple sclerosis. So what they wanted to test in this study, this double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study, they wanted to look at, giving people oral supplementation of vitamin D3, and to see if somebody had this clinically isolated syndrome, and they had very specific recommendations of the participants, but it was according to the McDonald 2010 criteria. So if somebody had that first attack and they gave them vitamin D3 supplements, they wanted to know if it was going to help to decrease the number of people that would go on to having multiple sclerosis. So they wanted to see if it would decrease the conversion of that first attack to a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. They also wanted they looked at different doses. So they gave some of the participants 1,000 international units, and I believe 5,000 international units and 10,000 international units. So different participants got different doses. And some people got a placebo, so they got no vitamin D. And the people that were taking or were recording the data, they didn't know if a participant got vitamin D or if they got a placebo. This study was done for almost 7 years, between 2013 and about 2019. And they had about 204 participants. So it's not a huge study, but they had a lot of criteria. It was not, they wouldn't just let anybody into the study. It had to be specific people. So they did conduct this double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trial. This was done in Australia and New Zealand. And the results were that there was no clear evidence that vitamin D supplementation would be helpful as a disease-modifying therapy, because a lot of people actually use vitamin D for therapy. So there's a certain, I don't want to say the name, but there's a certain, I think he's a doctor who came up with this vitamin D therapy where people take very high doses of vitamin D. And I personally wouldn't do that. I think that is toxic. And from everyone I've talked to that has done that therapy, or talking to practitioners that recommend that therapy, it's not it's not really a big help. And we know why, because it's not treating the infections. But so they found that, for people that want to use vitamin D, taking vitamin D3 and getting their vitamin D blood test results into the optimal range or nice and high, that it's not helpful to, like, as a disease-modifying drug. It's not going to be a medication to help multiple sclerosis. They also found that younger age, so people that got diagnosed with MS or had the first attack when they were younger, they had more different symptoms of MS, so not just like one symptom, but multiple symptoms, and they had specific lesions. They were at greater risk of a relapse, which makes sense, right? Because if it's infection and if you have a lot more symptoms, and so that means that your immune system is struggling a lot more, and you've got a lot of lesions, then you can definitely have more of a relapse. They looked at latitude, so remember, going farther away from the equator, and cooler temperatures, higher altitudes, etc. That was associated with more of a probability of conversion of it converting to multiple sclerosis, so that first attack converting to MS. And changing the dosages, so whether they gave the participants 1,000, 5,000, or 10,000 international units, it really didn't help the conversion, like between the first attack to multiple sclerosis. So giving people more vitamin D3 did not help decrease the conversion of MS into like real MS. So their conclusion is that they said, this study does not support the use of oral vitamin D supplementation across the dosage range of 1,000 to 10,000 international units per day in vitamin D. Let's see, so in student, or sorry, not students, I'm working with students all the time. So giving MS patients that have had this clinically isolated syndrome to prevent them from developing multiple sclerosis. So they found that it did not support giving people vitamin D supplementation. So they're not saying you shouldn't take it, they're just saying there was no benefit that they could pick out in their data that they collected. And they did also state that the over 200 participants, they didn't just also select people that were deficient in vitamin D. They were more interested in the lesions. They were more interested in if they had this clinically isolated syndrome as per McDonald 2010 criteria. So they weren't. So some of the people that were in the study had a vitamin D deficiency, and some didn't, and they did not make that as part of what they were looking at. So do vitamin C supplements help? This is my own personal opinion. So this comes from myself recovering from multiple sclerosis. This comes from working with hundreds of people that are diagnosed with MS from all over the world. Many have recovered. Many are on the journey to recover. And it's true that some people could have a deficiency in vitamin D in their blood test results, absolutely. Just like they could have low blood iron, they could have low thyroid. So what we do in the Live Disease-Free plan is we just help our students to look at their basic blood work and support their adrenals, their thyroid, their iron, and their vitamin D3, the vitamin D in their blood. They might have to take some vitamin D3, but we're not believing that that is going to cure them. It's just supporting physiology so that your body is stronger, that it can help in the fight. And we know, and you can do some searching on this after if you want, that there's a really big link between people that have even Borrelia, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, and they have lower vitamin D levels. So the doctors that I've studied under, they say that Borrelia really loves vitamin D. And so, like, for example, I was one child out of 6 children, and we hung out together. We were on the farm. We played outside together. We did a lot of the same things. And then I was the only one that came down with MS. So we were in the same environment. We live in the same environment, very similar habits, same latitude or altitude, geographically, very similar diets, I would say. And why is it that I was diagnosed with MS and they weren't, right? Well, number one really big factor was that I was on tetracycline for months for acne. I was the only one out of 6 children that was on that. and that really devastates our ecosystem, makes us susceptible to the parasites in our environment. We lose our natural defense, and I lost my natural defense. And so then if we are, let's say we are exposed to Borrelia, which pretty much all of us are now, then if you have a strong immune system, if you have a strong microbiome and natural defense, then the Borrelia and others are not going to be a problem. And it may not only be Borrelia, but we know that Borrelia is really linked closely with low vitamin D. So could it be that we have certain infections that make us deficient in certain nutrients? Like we know Candida can make us deficient in iron, but so can worms. And so there are certain microbes that can make us deficient in vitamin D. And maybe maybe we don't get as much sunshine in certain areas, like where we live in the winter, we definitely get less. But is that the cause of multiple sclerosis? Is that the cause of why we develop MS after the first attack? The research is not showing that. And this was another study. So this was one of the first studies that is actually a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trial where they're controlling a lot of factors so that you're able, and again, you'd have to duplicate this study and you'd have to do more studies, but who's going to do a study on vitamin D, right? There's no money in doing a study on vitamin D. It would have to be literally, people that are doing fundraising for the MS Society, and they would have to take the money and put it towards researchers that would study this further. I personally don't know that it's really worth studying it anymore. I personally just think because of the huge mountains and mountains of evidence that multiple sclerosis is an infectious disease, I think we should take our dollars, our research dollars, and put them there. I think that we should understand that any nutrient that's not optimal in our body, we should bring it up. We should definitely, if we need to take some vitamin D in the winter, that's fine. Or if we're not getting enough sunshine, obviously try to get sunshine. Sunshine is your best source. But we know through all the work of like hundreds of studies linking Lyme disease, also the MS Society is talking about how closely linked MS and Lyme disease are, and then different like protists like Babesia or malaria, all the research there, Dr. Alan McDonald finding the worms, different universities talking about dysbiosis, meaning we're really out of balance. We have too many disease-causing microbes and not enough health-promoting microbes. So we really don't need to spend a lot more research on this. I personally don't think. I just think that we should get some sunshine, get some activity, focus on trying, get our fund studies where they're trying to identify, could there always be, 1, 2, or 3 common parasites in multiple sclerosis or in ALS or in PLS, right? Is it always different, or could it be similar parasites? And we're seeing that definitely similar, but we haven't found that it's kind of like, yes, it's always filarial worms and fungus, for example, or Borrelia, the Lyme disease, that it is multiple different parasites. We have to knock back bad bacteria, protists, worms, and fungi. We have to knock them all back. But when you do that, it changes your life. Like you're dealing with this, what you think is a mysterious illness that's taking over your body, but it's just chronic, silent, parasitic infections. And so I think that it's time to lay this whole topic of vitamin D supplementation to rest. I think that what's more important is to look at our blood work and support our physiology in all different ways. But then once you're ready to treat, I'll just talk a real quick minute here about the Live Disease-Free plan. What we do, number one, we stop feeding the parasites so much. We can't starve them to death, but we can definitely decrease the food to them. That makes them less active. We notice a lot of improvements in our symptoms. The inflammation starts to go down. getting down to closer to 30 total grams of carbs per day. You can find the Live Disease-Free Diet Guidelines on our website, Live Disease-Free, under Research. You'll find them there. So follow the diet. You'll start to feel better if you get your carbs low enough in as little as 1 to 2 weeks. It's really exciting, and it's something that you can do right away. You don't have to think about it. You can just go there. You can print off the cheat sheet. You can watch the 3-minute video for all the guidelines if you want to watch what I eat for breakfast, lunch, and supper, just so you have better ideas. But that's it. So stop feeding the infection so much. They love carbs. Decrease the carbs. Support your body. Number 1, daily bowel movements. Number 2, sleeping at least 8 hours per night. Number 3, decreasing things like mold and radiation in the environment. Other things are important too, but those are the first 2 big factors that really can hold us back. Obviously, we're living in a time where there's a lot of stress. So stress, obviously, managing that is very important also. So when we've worked through the checklist for healing and we've supported the body, we have even more symptom improvements. The more symptom improvements we have, it's so exciting. Like, it's just so shocking that we have students right now in our program that are having improvements in, less numbness and less spasticity, and being able to stand up just with diet and supporting the body, being able to stand up out of a scooter for the first time in years, having MS for 31 years. And not everyone gets quite that, like in 3 or 4 weeks gets that kind of symptom improvements, but it's just shocking. We've had many people that do. You still have to treat the parasites. Absolutely. You still have to treat them, but it's so exciting when you can see that you're on the right track. You can go, Pam is actually telling me the truth. She actually knows what she's talking about. She's not just giving me some more BS that we get all the time. This supplement, this diet, that diet, this is so confusing, and it's so hard to figure out what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. So when you get results, you know that you're on the right track. And then what you do is, once you have supported the body and you're feeling a lot better, then we get energy tested to see which of the treatments test well for us. Usually 3 to 5 parasite drugs we test well for. And then it's about, how do I take these so that I'm not laying on the couch feeling like I'm dying, right? Because when you start killing, especially the bigger worms, you can feel awful if you don't do it properly. So that's why we do the prep work. That's why we introduce the parasite drug slowly. But we want to use effective doses. If you don't use an effective dose, you're not going to recover. I was talking with a gentleman today from Europe. He's going to join us. He was doing a night shift. He's just going to bed, and he'll join tomorrow. But he's like, I'm just taking this one parasite drug. It's a paste, and I'm taking about a thumbnail. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, don't do that. I have no idea. Like, I know by weight, I don't know what product that is, but that's never a good idea. Like, what if you're taking too much and you can hurt yourself? What if you're not taking enough and then the parasites become resistant in time, and then this drug is not going to work for you? So he's not going to do that anymore, and he's actually going to follow a proven plan. What if he doesn't even need that treatment? It did give him some symptom relief, but he still has most of his symptoms. But it gave him enough that he goes, oh my gosh, this is the direction I need to go. And then he found us, because we talk a lot about parasites. So the key is that you want to use the right treatments. You want to use them at the right dosages. They're not a magic cure. They're not. We use oxygen type therapies, herbs, and the parasite drugs after we have supported the body so that we're feeling a lot better. Then we have the magic. Then things really start to come together. I'm going to see if you guys have any questions for me. All right, so hello, Facebook user. Hi, Tiffin. Eating your green leafy salad with olive oil and homemade mayonnaise. That's awesome. Make sure you have some animal protein there. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, George. I've been taking vitamin D for over a year now. Should I stop taking it? Well, I guess you can have your blood work done and see where your actual test result is. If it's below normal, then you would take vitamin D. But our students would take, 1,000 or 2,000 international units. We don't recommend 5 to 10 to 20,000, or some of these, they'll go up to 50,000 or higher. And when you do that, the vitamin D actually acts like a steroid, and it's more like an immunosuppressive. So whenever we take high doses of any kind of vitamins or nutrients, and again, it's just not natural, then they act almost like a medicine, and then they're going to have adverse effects. So, if you need it, like we're in Canada here, and I get very little sunshine. We've actually had sunshine for the last 3 days. It's so exciting to have sun back again. I'm a sun lover. I just love sun. But, this is where, a basic blood test can tell you where you're at. And you definitely want to be in the optimal range, but not because it's going to have a major impact on multiple sclerosis. It's your body needs nutrition, right? So you want to make sure all your nutrients, and that's why we take a plant-sourced multivitamin mineral, especially in the winter when we're eating produce that doesn't have a lot of flavor. It is very deficient in nutrients. So again, it's not that the vitamin D don't expect miracles from it when you're taking it, but we do want to optimize all of the nutrition because that helps our body to run properly. It helps our body to function. So George, you have relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. And Catherine, what is the optimal level of vitamin D in your blood? Well, it depends on what country you live in, what blood test you're having done. But just make sure that there's always like a normal range, and you want it to be on the high end of the normal range, like just in the normal range, but above the average, and that should be good. And again, whenever you can, try to get sunshine. Sunshine is your best source of vitamin D, absolutely. Hi, Louise. It should also be noted that vitamin D3 supplementation should be taken with vitamin K2. Vitamin D3 is really a hormone. It mobilizes calcium in the body. So when you do take vitamin D3, like usually we are taking it with our meals, then you should be getting K2 like with us because we're eating a lot of leafy greens, a lot of vegetables. Same thing with calcium. When you're taking calcium, you want to take some other things with it. And Goddess 110, you recently took doxycycline antibiotics and you felt better in your leg spasticity. You definitely think infections are the cause. They are absolutely the cause. But doxycycline we have not found will cure you. We don't find that antibiotics are the answer. And people that have taken antibiotics for months for trying to treat chronic infections, they still become disabled. That's been our experience. And that's not us recommending it. It's just I follow all kinds of different people. And I just wanted to mention too that with this study, we always look at the conflicting or competing interests. So at the end of this study, there are a lot of different groups that would be listed here as conflicting interests. And so Novartis, Merck, Roche, and Genzyme, Biogen, a lot of pharmaceutical companies. So, I think what we have to look at is, number one, we look at all of the previous research. They have never been able to conclude that that supplementing with vitamin D has really made a big difference, that they've proven that, that was what caused the huge difference. And then this double-blind placebo-controlled study is showing that they cannot say that it is going to stop MS from developing. And again, just putting it in perspective, it's like, sure, if you're deficient in any vitamin, you need to bring that up. Get plant-sourced vitamins, so D3, not other vitamins, Ds, but vitamin D3 is important. But just understand that you're just doing things to support your body to function. but it's not going to get rid of the cause, and the cause is parasites. And so if this is the first time that you've listened to my video and you're like, what, parasites? Then make sure to, number one, watch some of my other videos. And it's not just the science. So we've got lots of amazing videos on YouTube, but also on Rumble. Rumble is like YouTube, but it's not censored. So I can put videos up there that I can talk about things that won't get censored. Also check out our website. We have a blog, and the blog posts, they talk about very important topics. You can pick your topic, you can scan the notes really quickly, or you can listen to the shortened videos. And we talk about all these different types of topics. If you get to the place where you're like, I know that I have parasites, just like the gentleman I was talking to today, and I am ready. I'm ready to treat. I want to treat parasites, but I need a plan. I don't have a practitioner that can help me. Make sure to reach out to us and watch my masterclass training, because there you are going to learn all the steps we take. This is a proven plan. There are thousands of people that have followed it. It works. So you got to first support the body, treat the parasites over multiple cycles until you're completely symptom-free, and then continue building a healthy lifestyle. All of those things are important. But it's a skill that you need to have for the rest of your life. You really need it for the days that are coming up here. We're going into some very, very interesting, challenging times. Good will prevail, I know that for sure, but it could get pretty rough. And you need your health. You really need your health. And I believe it may get a little more difficult to get help in the near future, but what you want to do is you want to start living your life. You want to start implementing and treating these parasites and doing the things you love to do again. So make sure to watch my masterclass training. It gives you all the steps. If you need support, then fill out the form and watch the coach-a-thon and book a time to chat with me. You can get started right away to make sure it's a good fit for you. And I would be honored to support you. Your health is very, very important to me. So with that, I'm going to let you guys go. Please like, share, and subscribe if you appreciate all this information that I research and bring to your attention. And we will talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye for now.